Okay, here we go, guys. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas Perek Ches, Halacha Gimel, Dalid, and perhaps we will start Halacha Hey. We are learning today Daf Pei Beis. We left off on Daf Pei Aleph Amid Beis, 5 lines before the bottom of the Amid, right? When the Gemara asks, "My Tamoin," the Beis Shammai, quickly recapping the Halacha Gimel, the Mishnah. And as we spoke out yesterday, that in the Yerushalmi, the understanding of the Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is only regarding one topic, and that is that the mappa, the cloth, the hand towel that was used to dry one's hands after one washed natilas yadayim, which is now moist, and we're going to get in today the level of moisture which will qualify that into liquid, but that is moist, according to the Yerushalmi's understanding in this Mishnah. Both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel hold that one is allowed to put the mappa on the table, and this isn't only a theoretical. It was practical to have that cloth near the person eating because they had no cutlery, they had no napkins. During the meal, when their hands would get soiled, they benefited by having something upon which they can wash their hands, they can clean their mouth. So L'Kula Alma, you can put it on the table. And just to quickly recap, because in Eretz Yisrael, as we spoke on in the Charedim, the vast majority of the tables were made out of items, were made in a way that they're not mekabel tuma at all. And we'll see in a moment why that's important, as we'll get soon. So let's go. What is the machlokes in the Mishnah? Beis Shammai holds, as we read in the Mishnah, that you may not put it on the cushion. You can only put it on the table. You may not put it on the keses. Keses means the cushion or the pillow that you use on the couch that you're leaning on. And Beis Hillel holds that you are allowed to place it not only on the table, even on the keses. That's where we left off. And it's going to be a hemshech to what we already started last week. Yes, we're going to again go back to a couple of the gezeros that were enacted Ba'aliyas Hananya ben Chizkiah ben Gorein, as recorded in Bavli Shabbos Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis onwards, the Shmoina Asar Davar, right? And as we'll see, again linked to the permissibility of using a keses that's tamei, because the type of tumah that would be on a cushion, if it would be tamei, is not enough to make the person tamei. So Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai both held such a keses may be used. And here again, the problem will be is that since the cloth that you use to wash your hands is moist, and as we learned that even if something is only tummy on the level of a sheni, which is what the keses could be, even though it's only able to be pasel truma, to impart truma to truma, that could become a shlishi, midrabanan. If it has contact with liquid, the liquid becomes a rishon. In other words, that's the same concept that will be the Beis Shammai. In other words, the liquid in the mappa could become a rishon. If that's the case, if you're going to put the mappa on the keses, then you're going to touch the mappa while you're cleaning yourself. You undid your whole netilas yadayim. Beis Hillel, let me just throw out the words, holds safek mashkin liyodayim tahor. As we'll see, as this is going to go into the level of moisture that this towel will have, is not absolute that there's enough liquid for it to be qualified as mashkin. It's only a doubt. And really, there's a rule. Safek, when it comes to tumas yadayim is only a sheni, tumas yadayim is only a derabanan. Beis Hillel holds any safek be yadayim, the tumas yadayim, we're going to be lenient. The question will be, what will be shitas Beis Shammai? We're going to have some great nuanced chidushim b'shitas Beis Shammai in the topic of netilas yadayim when we keep on learning, correctly so, that Chazal enacted Stam Yadayim because they are Askaniyos is Tame on a level of a Sheni, we will see that there is one Tana that understands that this Takanas Chachamim is even more Chamor the way it sounds. The hands are a Sheni for Truma, and the hands are a Rishon for Chulin. Right, you're going to say, what, for Chulin, we're going to be more Machmer than for Truma? We're going to speak it out when we learn, but there was such a Shita. And we're going to have some real back and forth. Bishitas, Bishamay, Bisilol. Another important part of this conversation will be, again, no one debates the fact that Midrabanan, if something, even if it's only tummy on the level of a Sheni, something that can only passel Truma, if it touches mashkin, any of the mashkin, it makes it tchila. The mashkin has to be mashkin. When you have moisture in a cloth because you dried your hands, how much moisture must there be in it for it to have the geder of mashkin? And that's going to be also linked to one final topic on the sugi before we move on to the next halacha, to the next mishnah, and that is what happens if a person smeared their body with oil, as Kevan understands that Chazal speak at times we learn about the oil, and going to the mikveh is metayir adam. Mikveh is metayir almost all kalim. Mikveh can be metayir even mayim, but all other foods and liquids, once they become tummy, there's no tahara. So we're going to learn a mishnah which is related to how much is it considered liquid? How much do you need of it if a person smeared their body with oil, which is what people used to do, and they're tummy and they went to the mikveh? Does the oil remain halachically as a distinct entity, and therefore, once the oil became tummy, there's no tahara, and then there'll be times where we say that since the oil is on the body, it's bottled to the body. It's not considered oil anymore. And therefore, yeah, if the person is tummy, then the oil on the person is tummy because it's the person. Once the person goes to the mikveh, it will be matayid, even the coat of oil you have on the body, but that will be one of the sources of, depending how much oil is on the body, depending how much liquid is the cloth. From there, we're going to move on to halacha dalit, right on daf pei beis amid beis. The Mishnah is going to speak about another machlokes Bishamai and Bisilo regarding whether there is a obligation to sweep the crumbs off the table and or floor prior to washing mayim achrayim, or whether there is no such of an obligation. All of that will be connected with underlying sugya, that even though that in our Mishnah Beis Hillel is lenient, but that's because Beis Hillel holds that asur lihishtamesh v'shamesh am haaretz. And since Beis Hillel holds that you cannot use a waiter that's an am haaretz, the waiter will know, as we'll go into the topic, that there is a big difference whether crumbs are less than the size of a kazayis versus whether they have the size of a kazayis or more. Less than a kazayis is something for which we don't say bal tashchis on. Once crumbs are not little shtikalach, but once they are of the size of a kazayis, this is considered food, which may not be ruined, which may not be soiled, and washing mayim achrayim on such crumbs would push it, ruin it. That will be the topic of halacha dalet, and halacha hey, if we'll have time, is something that will be for us chazara, because we already spoke it out just a couple last week, and that will be when a person ate Shabbos afternoon, and they ate into Matzah Shabbos, and they have 1 cup of wine, and there's a mitzvah to bench on wine, and there's a mitzvah to make Havdalah over wine. On top of that, in Havdalah, we make a bracha on the neir. We make a bracha on psamim. The question will be, the Shami Basil asked, what will be the seder of all of these 4 things that you have to touch on? The Mishnah doesn't even mention yayin. That is what we spoke out last week. But there's going to be the version of the Mishnah. There's going to be, we already learned this, the Girsa, the Braisa, where Rabbi Yehuda has another version of the machlokes between Bishamai and Basil. In that itself, there is a machlokes in Girsa'is. And the final topic in halacha hey will be the nusach of the bracha over the neir, in which there is a double machlokes Bishamai and Basil. Number 1 is whether you say the words bara or boirei. In brachos, the words have to imply past tense. No one debates that. Bara is past tense. Boirei sounds like present. It also might also mean past. So Beis Hillel holds you could say and you should say boirei, because that's the lashon of the pasuk. And the other detail in the machlokes is whether you say the words ma'oir or ma'oirei as we'll at least open up this topic in today's year. So without any further ado, the first bulk of today's class is Tuma and Tara, which is really special. It's a schus to learn these sugyas in the Gemara, especially since the Gabbai loves it. So
loves it.
And if all I can have a little merit in channeling is a little bit more of a geschmack to the Gabbai in this, for that dayenu, the whole life is worth it, because there's nothing sweeter than these halachas. And now let's go, guys, 5 lines before the bottom of the Amid. My Taman the Beishama, who holds that on the table, yeah, but to put the mappa on the kesses, you may not. So we already spoke it out by heart. So the Gemara says, Shelo yitamu mashkin shuba mappa min kesses. Everyone holds that the kesses may be tamei, and you will use it. Now, guys, don't forget, there are many levels of tuma. No one holds you can have a cushion that can be matama adam. Of course not. We're speaking about a tuma on a keli that's so low that cannot be matame adam and kelim. As we speak out, that midoy raisa, only an af can be matama adam and mashkin. Means if you have a cushion that's a rishay, forget about a sheni. Only a rishay, it cannot be matama adam and kelim. Why would you not be able to use it? Certainly, if a keses would be a sheni, which I don't want to get into that, but a keli could become a sheni midrabanan, the outside of it, you could use it. So since Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel hold that a keses can be tamei at a very low level, as long as there's no mashkin, nothing bad can happen. But what might happen? You dried your hands on the cloth. Beis Shammai holds that there's not a possibility. There's a possibility halachically. We have to take into account that there might be so much moisture of the water that is in the cloth that will make it still considered halachic mayim. Now, when mayim has contact with even only a sheni, midrabanan, the mayim becomes a rishay. You will dry your hands on the mayim. Your hands will become a sheni during the meal. You're cleaning yourself. So you undid your whole netilas yadayim. Now that makes a lot of sense. So the question will be, why would Beis Hillel be lenient? Beis Hillel also holds, we're not gonna go back and forth on that you can use a kesses that's tamei on a level of a rishay. So my tam and the Beis Hillel. So here's the key, and that will be really the topic. The topic is like this. Let me start saying the words. There are different levels of liquid. There's liquid that's dripping. As we're going to learn later, the oil on the body, that's mamish liquid. Just because it's on my body, it's dripping off my body. Then it's not dripping off. The water that you have in a cloth doesn't drip out of the cloth by itself. But how much liquid is there? There's going to be a shear of liquid that you can use to anoint, to smear a small aven. We're going to learn about that later today. The quantity, the shear that we're going to focus on now is called toifeach. Later we'll learn toifeach, almanas lahatfiach. I'll translate all that later. Toifeach means that if you touch it, you become moist. Sure, this we know. If I dried my hands on a hand cloth today, right? Especially if it's a very little hand cloth, or if it's a very skinny hand cloth, anyone, me or someone else, with dry hands that will touch the hand cloth, the hands could become moist. I know not always. I know that sometimes it's not enough liquid because the cloth is thicker, the cloth is bigger. Moist means moist. You'll feel that it's damp, but you won't become damp. Then it's not mine. In other words, Beis Hillel holds, when you dry your hands in the Netilas Yadayim on a mappa, it's not vaday mayim. We don't know how much water will be in this. Parenthetically, this happens to mean that if you happen to know that you're the 10th guy that used the same cloth, and you know that it's very wet, according to this understanding, Beis Hillel will say, don't put it on a kesses. It's common sense. You know the kesses is tummy. People knew these didn't. No, because we learned yesterday that the table is never tummy. The times in Eretz Yisrael, they use tables that can never be tummy.
Because they were breaking
Because of Hilchas Kelim. Yeah. Okay. Now, so Olam, that's his word. Olam Safik Mashkin La Yadayim Tahar. I'm reading inside the Charedim. You don't have to find it. It's like a middle. It's a lot. It's like 50 lines from the bottom, 40 lines from the bottom. Safik Mashkin. What do you mean Safik Mashkin? Says the Charedim. Shema Mashka Toifeyach Ala Mitvachas. Maybe the water in the hand cloth will make you moist. It's that much water. And Shema Eno Toifeyach. I so relate to this. Now, when you dry your hands on that cloth, if you never thought about it, I'm asking you, in your house, when you wash Shabbos for HaMoitzi, how wet is the cloth? Depends. Are you the third guy? You the first guy? Depends. My wife took out that type of cloth. I know it's thicker. The other one is thinner. It's not a clear-cut thing. And therefore, there's a rule. The rule is kol safek betumas yudayim tar. That's what the Charedim says on the words lo'olam safek mashkin laydayim. Don't forget, guys, the whole tumas yudayim is a derabana. So there's a rule. If you have any doubt when it comes to tumas yudayim, you're going to be lenient. Now, davar acher is gewaltig. We're going to see on Taf Pei Beis Amud Aleph that there is a Tana Rabbi Yossi that doesn't say always safek yudayim tar. He'll agree that sometimes we're lenient. We don't have to get into the when. Sometimes you're machmer. Now, once you already know that, it could be that Beis Shammai, who's the super machmer, will hold no that you're always machmer. So says Beis Hillel, even if one will argue with this, and he's going to hold, since anyways there's a machlokes for David. Beis Hillel holds that any safek biyodayim is tar. We know Rabbi Yossi holds sometimes tamei. You know what? Say you will always be machmer. You know when it makes sense to be machmer? Let's go back to why did they make the whole netilas yodayim? Because they said yodayim is a sheni. Okay, midrabana. Hold on. Sheni cannot make chulin into a shlishi. The only problem is for you when you eat truma. So mele, if you're eating truma and you have a safek and you want to say I'll be machmer, the Beis Hillel says, okay, I can swallow that. But let's not forget there's another layer. The gezeda was never made for chulin. The gezeda was only made that your dime is a sheni. The whole thing of chulin is another layer. Since a kohen, it's two layers. A kohen who eats truma because of the truma derabanan has to wash his hands. So then the chachamim said, when the kohen eats chulin, the kohen should also wash his hands. It's called sarach truma. He should be in the routine. You're not eating truma when he will. Then they went even any Jew who eats bread. That's called sarach truma. So Beis Hillel is saying davar acher. En yudayim l'chulin. En yudayim l'chulin means that the original derabanan, let's be machmir, is that your hands is a sheni. Sheni cannot make your hands, cannot make chulin tamei. So it's such a far-fetched gezeda, even if you want to say that will be machmir by safek yodayim. I don't know how wet the cloth is, but let's be machmir always. Doesn't make sense, because even if your hands become tummy, really you can eat chulin with it. We can, but it's too much of a derabbanan to be machmir. No, for chulin, even a coin for chulin. In other words, the first step, David, the first step of this gezeda, according to Beis Hillel, we're going to see there's another Tana that argues, was only that when you eat truma. When someone says your hands are sheni, what does that mean? It means I can't eat truma. Never means I can't eat chulin, because a chulin does, because ein yodayim la chulin does even to a kohen when the kohen eats chulin. And so the Gemara says that's such a good argument. No, the Gemara accepted the davar acher. The Gemara understands that sometimes Beis Hillel says we have a safek yodayim l'kula. Beis Shammai can be machmer. But the second argument asks the Gemara, that's the way the Charedim learns it. That's a great point. We know that the Chachamim said, Yudayim is a sheni. A sheni cannot make chulin into a shlishi. Is serach truma to be machmer on a suffix serach truma? Doesn't make sense. The mappa, we don't care about the mappa here. Just want to say how this works. Very good. No. Very good. Just to point out. So Rabbi Mendel is saying, hold on. Let's go. The keses could be a sheni. No one debates that. If there would be enough liquid toifeach, we're going to get into that soon. If there's enough liquid, the liquid becomes a rishon. No one debates that. But that would mean that if this will touch chulin, it will make the chulin into a sheni, which is not a problem. They would never put the mop on the table. When you have, even now, when you have a napkin, I know it's disposable, you don't touch the food with a napkin, you'll soil your napkin. The napkin is to clean you. They had their hand towel, and after they ate, they would clean themselves. So the Gemara says, aha, I'll answer. Tifton means a chaba enf. That the reason for Beis Shammai's chumrah is either because Beis Shammai holds like Rab Shimon ben Elazar, that we'll say in a moment, or that Beis Shammai holds like Rab Elazar ben Rab Tzadik, that we'll say in a moment, and everything will make sense. And let's go to the first one. One option is Bishami holds like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar did Tanei. We learned in a Braisa. This is a bomb. That Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar oimer in the name of Rabbi Meir. Not the way we kept on saying. Not the way we learned in the Bavli. That Yodayim Shniyos. We keep on Yodayim Shniyos. No, this Tana holds. Now Bishami came before him, but we see that there was such a shita from the Tanoim. That you know what the Chachamim wanted? The Chachamim wanted for everyone to do Natilas Yadayim. How would the Chachamim not tzrach truma? How would they motivate you to do the Natilas Yadayim? By saying that if you don't do Natilas Yadayim, your hands are tummy enough to be metame the food that you're eating. Which means that when you're eating truma, your hands are asheni. That would make you watch Natilas Yadayim. They don't have to say your hands are arishay, because if I'm a kohen who's eating truma, even if my hands are asheni, I don't want to make the truma puzzle. I'm not more made. If my hands are arishay, I'm not going to eat truma, because then it becomes tamei and it can be metama other truma. I don't eat. But if I'm eating chulin, the Chachamim said my hands are arishay. My hands are arishay, because a chulin can only become a sheni. But if my hands are arishay, I'll make it into a sheni. Which is really gavaldik. It's only midrabanan, like my manavshach. Are you a rishon or are you a sheni? It's a drabanan. They wanted you to wash your hands. The way they did it, so don't say that it's so far removed. It's not far removed. They made lechatchila a gzeira on the yadayim for whatever you're eating. So now we're only back to the first answer of Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel has the right to say, as we learned, that any suffix biyodayim, we're going to be lenient. We already know that there's a shita Rabbi Yosi that sometimes is machmer. Bishame will always be machmer. That's one approach. The other approach will be, oh, you can have loss of it up tzaddik. What's it up loss of it up tzaddik? This is mamash amazing. The Tanina Taman, we're quoting a Mishnah in Taharos Pedig Beis. Chulin shenasu al gabar kodesh. Certain people took upon themselves a stringency. Guys, this is good to remember. This could be Kohanim, it could be Yisraelim. That they will treat their chulin. Remember that we had that in the third Pedig of Chagiga. Some people ate chulin betara. Some people were more machmir. They ate chulin as if it was truma. And then the most machmirim says, we're going to treat our chulin as if it's kachim. That means it can even become a revi. If someone does that, good, first of all, good for them. Nice. But does that change the status of the chulin? Which means, we keep on saying, correctly so, chulin does not become a shlishi. I know that. What happens if someone took upon himself or herself to eat chulin al taras hakodesh? Some people hold it doesn't change the din that your chulin cannot become more than a sheni. But Rab Lazar, the Rab Tzaddik holds that if someone took upon himself to eat chulin al gabe hakodesh, means with the standard of kodesh, Tanakama, the Chachamim held, it remains chulin. It can only become tamei up until a sheni. If it was touched by a sheni, it will not become a shlishi. But Rab Lazar, Rab Tzaddik, which is another amazing. Because once again, not like kachim. It's like truma, meaning letam b'shnayim v'liv soil echad. Wow. In other words, it becomes a rishon, it becomes a sheni. So does every chulin, but it even becomes a shlishi. And by the way, we use by a shlishi, we use the words puzzle. That's another rule we keep on saying, that if something is tamei and it still has the power to impart it further, we use the word tamei. If something is tamei but it cannot further imparted to its level, we call it puzzle. No, it's truma that as a shlishi is called puzzle. The bottom line is that we will answer. You know, when Beis Shammai says that you're not allowed to put the mapa on a keses, according to this understanding, only to the person who took upon himself to eat their chulin al gabi kodesh. And in that case, since Beis Shammai will hold that chulin could become a shlishi, chulin can become a shlishi. So therefore, the gezeira of washing the hands for chulin is not sirach truma, but it's meikar adin. And now the main machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel will be, how wet is the mappa? We don't know. The mappa is not vadai wet enough for it to be mashkin. If it would be that case, even Beis Hillel would say, don't put it on the kesses. There is a suffix. The machlokes is, how do we approach sfeikos by yodayim? Beis Hillel follows the rule that any suffix we're going to be lenient, and Beis Shammai will be machmer more than Rabbi Yosi. Any suffix, even this suffix. The question on this is, why is there even a suffix? Like, why don't we tell the person, check out the mappa? I know the answer for that. because we're going to see in a couple of lines from now. How do you define this? Like, we don't even know how to measure a kazayis. Look what's going on. You tell a person liquid is liquid if it's wet enough to make you moist, or to make your one hand moist, that if it touches something else, not everyone knows how to measure it. In other words, and it's valid to say, I'm telling you right now, your mappa, your hand cloth, how wet is it? Is it halachically called mashkin? I can say something. Okay, now the Gemara is going to ask a stira b'shitas beisilo, and to introduce the stira, like we mentioned before, if food or liquid other than water becomes tamei, it can never get tara. The only exception is water. We're going to learn two scenarios. One scenario is there was oil that was already tamei smeared on your body. Then there is a scenario where there's oil that was tahor, that was smeared on your body, and then you became tamei. We'll see there's a difference. And the person went to the mikvah. The question will be, will the oil remain status of separate mashkin? And therefore it's going to remain tamei, which will mean that if you touch it with your hands, I just want to make that clear. Mashkin midrabanan, I don't care how low down the chain. Even if mashkin only became a sheni, if it touches your hands, it turns into a sheni. So if the oil on my body remains tamei, the mashkin on my body cannot be matama. Speaking about the oil that's a rishon, cannot be matama adam. But if I'm going to touch it, which I will, my hands will become a sheni. Or do we say that the oil is bottled to me, and therefore it's not oil? When I found tahara, the oil, but that is completely tahara, and if I touch it, I remain tahara. My hands remain tahara. Let's read it inside. So that's a Mishnah in the Duyos, and we'll see how it's going to ask a contradiction on Beisil. Come on, Tanin. We learned over there. Duyos Peirik Dalet. Hasach Shem and Tahar. If you anointed your body with Shem and Tahar, you put it on you. When the oil was tamei, you were tamei. It's important. And then nitma. Nitma means the person became tamei. Now think about it. What happens when the person becomes tamei? Midrabanan, what would happen to the oil? The oil will become tamei. Listen, if there's very little oil, then it's you. Even if it's considered mashkin, even if I'm only tamei in the level of a sheni, midrabanan, when I have contact with any of the 7 liquids, one of them is olive oil, it becomes a tchila. Now it's a tchila. So the din is, and the other the tavel, and the guy did it without removing the oil off his body. And oil, as oil, can never find purification in a mikvah. So Beis Shammai says, listen here, even if the oil is still dripping off your body, means there's that much oil, it's that plentiful. Nevertheless, Beis Shammai is lenient. Shammai holds that the oil is tahor. Why is that? Because the oil is bottled to your body. I'm reading inside the Charedim around 10 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Beis Shammai Savri, then is batel, these are Hasidic words. Hashem and Begufay. It's still dripping off your body. I don't care. Now, I want to keep on reading the Charedim, but it's a chiddush. It's one of the cases where Beisilul is the machmer. Now, Beisilul Savrei, no. That loy mi boye, menativ the loy batel. More than that, I feel a loy menat, even if it's not dripping off your body. But there's enough oil for you to smear a aver cotton. Aver cotton means etzbektana shabiyad. All right, that's a lot more than toifeya. So there's dripping off your body is the most. The lower shiur is enough oil that you can smear a aver cotton. Loy batel. Now, and if I understand this correctly, just to say out, what Adam Tami means, guys, that if liquids on the level of a av touches me, Mendel, then I'm Tami. And if the liquids are not an av, then it'll be metama mayodayim when I touch it. Okay. Now, what's worse, you can keep your finger on the Charedim for like 4 lines from the bottom. We'll go back inside the Mishnah in the Gemara. So no, cotton. In other words, even if it's only that amount, it's still not butter. Still not butter. Now let's go further. Worse, what happens if the oil prior for it being smeared on your body was already tummy? Now, how is that worse? I want to tell you something amazing. These are concepts that you have. If the oil was tame prior to it touching your body, the tuma, think about tuma and yeshus, right? Chassidus puts it together. The tuma itself makes it a more davar b'fnei atzmai, which makes it harder to be bottled to the body. Even though in the reish of the Mishnah, it became tame, but that's because it was already on your body. It became tame through your body. If the oil was tame mitchi lasai, then it's harder to be mavatal. So here Beis Shammai will learn like Beis Hillel. Here Beis Shammai says that even if it's only kedei sichas katan, it remains tame. But if it's less than that, then it becomes tar. If it's less than that, it becomes tar. And Beis Hillel is even more mach, which is even if it's only toifeach. Toifeach means that if you touch it, it becomes moist. It's still not bottled to your body. It's in both Reish and Seifa. Beis Hillel is the machmer. But what we pointed out from this Mishnah is good. You see the shiurim dripping. Less than that is sichas aver cotton. Less than that is teifeach. And what does Beis Hillel hold? This is the Gemara key. That even if it's only teifeach, it's considered mashkin. What will all this be akasha? All this will be akasha is that l'choira in the towel there's teifeach. That's what we're getting to. Not a suffix. Vaday. Okay. Now, by the way, there's another version that Rabbi Yehuda holds, that Beis Hillel holds, teifeach umatpiach. It's called teifeach, and that's why we paskin this way. That means if it's only moist, it's not called liquid. Moist means, let's say there's oil here. Teifeach means there's enough oil here that if I touch it, the contact fingers become moist. Teifeach amanas latviach means that if I touch it, my fingers become so moist that whatever else my fingers will touch, that will also become moist. If it's less than that, sometimes it's so little and moist. I got moist, but I can't share it anymore. That means I can't smear it on the head of the waiter. It's not enough. So, and by the way, tefeach almanas latfiach is it's less than Aver Kat. Another shear. Okay, now, yes. Okay, so why are we bringing all this? So here, now I have a kasha. Mechalfa shita sayan. Get used to the words of the Yerushalmi. Turning to the Pei Beis Amud Beis, which is the Beis Hillel. Now I know there are two girsas that are minakotze elakotze, and the Chaval al Asman. It would be geschmack. I prepared the Charedim, the Mahara Fulda. Let's learn the Mahara Fulda. Okay, because the Charedim has the opposite version of our Gemara. So Tamana Mirinan Tomei. Look inside the top line of Mahara Fulda. That when this mashka tefeach, what does Beis Hillel say Tomei? And here asks the Gemara, b'mapa omru Beis Hillel maniach ala keses mishum safek mashkin v'shema ein sham kidei shiroi l'tamei. So the catch of the Gemara was, come on, when you dry your hands in a towel, forget about Rabbi Yehuda's girsa. Tefeach amanas latfiach, just tefeach. Are you telling me that there might not be enough? You're not going to get moist? Hadei efshed shelo yeh mashkin tefeach. That's the way that Ivid explains the kasha of the Gemara. There we say Tomei, and over here we're saying Tar because there's a doubt. The Gemara answers yes, there is a doubt. You know why? Because when you put oil on your body and you put water in a cloth, ain't no doima one case to the other. When you put oil on your body, the oil does not get absorbed, and therefore when you touch it, you will get moist. That's the nature of oil. It goes to the top. I know that there's a paradox in oil. On one hand, it floats to the top. On the other hand, it goes through everything, but it also stays aloof. Water in a cloth gets absorbed in it, like I mentioned. Depends how thick the cloth is, depends how much shemayim you use, depends how big your hands were. But Beis Hillel is right. That's the way the fact that Beis Hillel is machbet, and they hold that even if there's only the amount of tefeach, it's considered mashkin. So the kasha is, the way that Ivid says, are you telling me that when you wash your hands in a cloth, there's a suffix whether this mashkin teifeyach? Correct. Doesn't make it, there doesn't make, no, it's not. You know the oil, no, okay, let me go here, because both hold that you can use a keses, that's tummy, and everyone holds that even if the keses is only tummy on the level of a sheni, if the liquids have a din of liquids, they will become a rishon. Fact, not the cloth on the keses.
oil, and then it became.
Doesn't make that's a chared. It doesn't matter. That's the way that it doesn't matter. That detail is not negative. The point is that the Havamina is of the kasha. You're telling me that the oil in the cloth is not even toifeach. The Gemara says no, we don't know that. Come on, be'enoyu. Be'enoy means that you're not putting oil in a cloth. Yeah, a little bit of oil is toifeach. But over here, since balua bamapa. So yes, there is a suffix whether it's still toifeach or not. You can only argue, the only thing that people can ask out on this is, come on, so why didn't Basil say it depends how wet the cloth is? And I'm telling you, when you learn the Gemara, Taka comes out that if you know that the cloth is very wet, even Basil will say you can't put it on the kesses. But normally when you dry your hands, Natilas Yadayim, I'm going to ask you next time you do it, is your towel teifeya? Sometimes yes, sometimes not. Sometimes yes, sometimes not. I'll tell you more. More is even that really I want you to know that we hold that the shir of teifeach is not teifeach. We paskin teifeach al manas lahatfiach. That for sure I identify. No, even if when the cloth is wet and I touch it, my hands become a little bit wet. But for that to make something else wet, doesn't happen.
So Rabbi, according to the base sealer, you can only use a towel once.
I understand where you're going, but let's go weiter. Okay. Now next topic, next machlekes halacha. I'm sorry. Sure. In our Mishnah, we still is makel. Not only can you put it on the table, Yerushalmi, you can even put it on the cushion, because it's a suffix, whether it's mashkin, and called suffix biyadayim is good. Now, next topic is, it's funny how they argue. Beis Shammai sounds like he's machmir in our next Mishnah. Beis Shammai holds that when you finish the meal, before you wash mayim achreidim, Beis Shammai, you have to then be machabed habayis. I know covet means covet. Covet here means sweeping. So when you say let's be machabed that person, if you want to speak beremes, let's get rid of that guy. Sweep him out. So you machabed as habayis, and only then like latilas yadayim. Why? Why is that? So Beis Shammai's chumrah comes from Beis Shammai's kula. And by the way, life works that way. When you're leaning interior, you'll have to be stringent there. Are you allowed to use a waiter who's an Amma Aretz? Beis Shammai is lenient. Beis Shammai holds that you could. Not that every shamash will be an Amma Aretz, but you're not restricted only to the shamash Talmud Chacham. And therefore, the Amma Aretz, as the Charedim speaks out, doesn't know that if you have pirurim, which are leftover crumbs that are either on the floor when you ate on these little table, or they are on your table today when you eat like a Westerner. You have chairs and table, but on the table. They know that if there's pirurim, kishir, kazayis, or more, it has a din of bread, which you cannot stam throw out. And they would clean it off the table prior to you washing mayim achronim, which would soil it. Not only beruchnias because of what's in the mayim, but even begashmias. You're not going to have those crumbs if on it someone poured the mayim achronim. So therefore, since Beis Shammai holds that it's mutter to use a shamish am ha'aretz, so he says you have to make sure, if you get into this routine, first you're going to clear off the table, clear off all the crumbs. There won't be any crumbs. Now you can wash mayim achronim. Beis Hillel holds noitlim layudayim. No, you don't have to clear it off. You can wash natilas yadayim, and only then can you be and only then they are you machabed habayis. Says the Gemara. What's the reason of Beis Shammai? Huh? We're talking. My machlenim is always before. But kol ha'alma my machlenim.
At what point are you speaking the real?
That's the machlokes. Beis Shammai says you have to clear off the table, clear off the floor. You have to before my machlenim. So it says you don't have to. Why? Says the Gemara. My time in the Beis Shammai, because like the Charedim added that layer that the Gemara doesn't verbalize. Beis Shammai holds you're not obligated to use a shamash Talmud Chacham. Beis Shammai holds it's not asur lihishtamesh b'shamash ha'aretz, which means a Talmud Chacham knows this din of Bal Tashchis. He knows the shiur of a kazayis. Crumbs that are less than a kazayis is takar halachically garnished. 100%. B'chlal, there's a rule that if something falls on the floor, someone told me if it's not there for 30 seconds, b'chlal, it's not a problem. There's a time, 3 seconds. Okay, let's look. Oivden Oichlin is begashmias. Umatam and the Beis. So look, I know the Gemara says the words im hashamish pikeach. So the Charedim says im shamish pikeach. The first Charedim in the Gemara means not im. The word pikeach means a Talmud Chacham. Look how our Talmud Chacham means a pikeach. Okay, it means he knows the dinim. Not im. Im is not, the Rashi says im can have 4 meanings. Here it means since the shamish must be a pikeach, reading the Charedim. Because asur lihishtamish b'shamish am haaretz. He never would. He knows not to leave on the table the larger crumbs. He knows that automatically. He'll clear it off himself. And if he's not yet doing the clean job, he can leave the pachos mikazayis, and you can leave pachos mikazayis and the noitin liyadayim, and then whenever convenient, he'll be mechabe habayis gavaldik. All right. And I just want to say one thing that many understand. It's not that Beis Hillel is saying you have an option, which you do. Beis Hillel actually holds that when it comes to cleaning, who should be clean first? Beis Hillel holds that, and Beis Shammai agrees with the concept. The problem is that the shamash could be an amorit. Cleanliness first, the person, then the house. People say baltashkas. Baltashkas, like finish your plate. Baltashkas. The answer to that is baltashkas, the gufa adif. Overeating is ruining my body. My body is more important than the food. Cleanliness of the body is more important than cleanliness of the environment. You have such people that they everything is projected outwards. Clean yourself up first. Beruchnias and begashmias. So since Beis Hillel holds that you are allowed to wash my machreinim before you sweep up the house, he wants you to do it in that order. Let's move on to the next mission. Guys, now it's Chazar. So the case of the Mishnah 5, let's see how far we can get. You began a meal Shabbos before Shkia. Completely mutter. Mitzvah. Yehei chelki ma'oichle yishal, the 3 meals. And if you didn't have until then, chapanai. You are eating a meal. You can eat as long as you want. Lechatchila. It's Matzah Shabbos, you're eating a meal, like we do right now. Now that you're benching, now you're going to do everything together. Everything together. We do something similar now, but they've used 1 cup, mitzvah to be mavarach al the koishal yayin. The Mishnah is not mentioning when you make the bracha over the yayin. That's a topic we learned last week. Here, what we're focusing on is there are 4 brachas that have to be said. What's precedence? What's the seder? What's the 4 brachas? Birchas hamazon. And the Havdalah, you have the way we would do it, Samim, Neid, Havdalah. But let's read in the Mishnah. So we have the Girsa of the Mishnah. We're going to have then the Baraisa that has another whole Girsa of Machlikas B'Shama B'Yisrael. Mishnah holds the Machlikas is B'Shama Yoimnim. The Seder is Neid U'Mazain, Samim and Havdalah. And let's understand that we already learned last week why Neid first. According to this version of the Mishnah, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel hold Neid first, because people were poor. Many people were poor, so poor that they barely could afford oil. They had oil for Friday night candles. There's very little oil left. Many of them would make the boire ma'orei ha'esh on those candles that are about to go out. In other words, there was a fear that you'll run out of oil. So the Neid you do first. The next is Mazin. Why the next Mazin? Because what chiyuv came first? You began the meal before. Birchas hamazon. That's the Seder. Then you do Psamim and Havdalah last. Why Havdalah last? Because Havdalah means Shabbos is out. I don't want to give the wrong impression that I'm happy Shabbos is over. Let me make Havdalah as soon as I could. Havdalah the last. I just said that there's not enough oil. Now, okay, let's go back. Let's go be Beis Hillel loimrim Neir. Same reason. Now Beis Hillel holds B'Samim U'Mazain. Yes, guys, yes, that the chiyuv of the Mazain came first. But why do you have the Samim for? Because you're sad that Shabbos went out. According to them, Neir and Samim doesn't show like David.
Hello, anybody there? You guys see the rabbi?
I see.
Thanks. Rabbi, you're on mute.
Boire, even for past tense. But I butters befedish past tense. We want to use lashon hakra. And when it comes to the creation of fire, the Torah uses the words boire. And I'm reading inside the Rashi, the Charedim that quotes Rashi, the third line on the bottom. Sha'al bria so'or. We are praising God for that which He created, the fire b'sheishes and bereishis. We're not contradicting the emes of the Baal Shem Tov that God is recreating everything every month. We know that. But we're trying to end for, why are we doing Ned Matzah Shabbos? You want to show that it's not Shabbos. You want to do something you can't do on Shabbos. There's so many malachas, there's 39 malachas. Why fire? There's another layer. I want to remember that when did fire come into the world? Matzah Shabbos. When by Yom Marish, the first Shabbos. So you want to speak past tense. Beis Hillel says the word boide could mean past tense, since in the verse in scripture, boide is for past tense. Use the lashon hakra. And number two, me'oire, illuminations. Why illuminations? Because in fire you have red, you have white, you have yellow. In fire there's different madregas. The Rebbe says koyach and poyel, another expression. Beishama is bekoyach. Bekoyach it's one. But poyel, it's all different fires. We'll leave it here, and God willing to be continued.
Yeah.
Guys, we need to leave the davening at Chaval. I'm sorry, you guys on the Zoom. The Zoom fell. The Zoom came back.
It came back fine. All right.